My brothers and sisters, the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." The Gospel of the Lord.
Greetings of peace and goodness, my friends. You remember last week's gospel about give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. It was sort of a two-parter. We have another two-parter. It follows right on the heels of last week's gospel. Which are the two greatest commandments? It was a good question, a legitimate question, because you see, there were 613 commandments. So it was important for the Jews to know, well, which is the most important? Because they ranged in all manners of life, from finding a bird's nest to loving God. And Jesus answered, love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. And the second one is like it. Well, no one asked what the second commandment was. They just wanted to know what the first one was. But the fact that Jesus took these two commandments and put them together was revolutionary. That was unheard of. Loving God and loving neighbor are alike. Love God with all your mind, heart, and soul. And the second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. But we do separate them. Oh, we do so in the guise of efficiency or pragmatism as well as judgment. But clearly, Christ does not and never did want that to be the case. Many Catholics think that when they have attended to their religious duties for the week, they can sit back and relax for the rest of the week, present company excluded, of course. They have done their bit for God. They need do nothing more. Those religious duties do not commit them to do anything more for the rest of the week or for the rest of their lives, in fact. Listen to this quote. The split between the faith which many profess in their daily lives deserves to be counted among the more serious errors of our age. Those are not my words. Those are the words of Vatican II, way back then. In the early centuries of Christianity, back further than Vatican II, thousands of people left the world, and they became monks, and they went to live in the desert. They wanted to devote themselves to loving and serving God exclusively in order to ensure their eternal salvation. In other words, to devote their lives to the expression of the first portion of that great commandment. So in the desert, they lived very strict rules according to their focus only on God. They fasted, they prayed, they undertook severe penances, all in the name of demonstrating or illustrating their love for God with all their heart, with all their mind, with all their soul, and to grow in that endeavor. Well, in one particular part of the desert, there was a monk. His name was Moses. In fact, he was an abbot. He had a great reputation for holiness and was looked upon by many of the other monks as very saintly. Well, it was coming up to Easter, so the monks met to see what they should do to prepare for Easter. They were very anxious to do something special that would show their love for Christ, who suffered, died, and rose from the dead for them. So they decided to fast the entire week of Holy Week, the entire week. Very little eating, very little drinking. Having made that decision, each monk went back to his own spare cell. But a couple of wandering monks approached Moses' cell. They were not part of the community. And they came to visit because they heard about Moses. They were starving from their journey. Moses took pity on them, and he cooked them a little vegetable stew. To make them feel at ease, he took a little of it for himself. In the meantime, the other monks saw the smoke rising from Abbot Moses' cell. Obviously, he didn't have a microwave. It could only mean one thing. He had lit a fire to cook some food. In other words, he had broken the agreement upon that solemn fast. Well, they were shocked. They were saddened at seeing such weakness in their abbot. And in the eyes of many of them, Moses fell from that great pinnacle of sanctity. In a group, they went over to his cell to confront him. Moses came out to meet them, and he could see from the look of their faces the judgment that they were about to make. So he said to them, "What crime have I committed that you look at me like this?" They answered, "You've broken the solemn, agreed upon fast, the fast that we all undertook out of love for our crucified Lord." Moses answered, "So I have. I have broken the fast. I have broken the commandments of men, but in sharing my food with these brothers of ours, I have kept the commandment of God, that we should love one another. Do you not think that Christ would have done the same thing? Did he not eat and drink with sinners, even though the religious leaders were scandalized and called him a glutton?" Moses continued, and he addressed the group that confronted him. "My brothers, you have torn the gospel in two. There are two great commandments, not one. Christ said that we were to love the Lord our God with all our hearts and all our souls, and that we were to love one another as ourselves. Hence, therefore, it is far better to eat meat and drink wine than by detraction to devour another person's character by rumor and insult and innuendo. We did not come into the desert to get away from people and to be alone with God. We came here to find other people and to find and love them in God." Those monks went away, humbled, but all the wiser. This is the message of today's gospel. It's easy for us to make the same mistake as those monks. It is easy to make the same mistake as the scribes and the Pharisees, to think that there is only one commandment, mainly to love God. We can easily deceive ourselves. Our love of God can so easily be a mere love of self. And to love yourself only is really to be loveless, because you're not loving anybody else. And lovelessness cannot be hidden. We fool no one. A loveless life is an unhappy life, a frustrated life, and in the end, a life that will destroy you. Oh, we can go to St. Anne-de-Beaupré in Quebec, St. Joseph's Oratory in Montreal. We can make all the Divine Mercy novenas we have and it's time to spare, all the prayers to St. Teresa, all the novenas to the Sacred Heart, all the First Fridays. We can go to Lourdes and Fatima, to the ends of the earth, to see the wounds of a pious, holy woman or man, and do it all in the name of religion and of love of God. Yet we might forget the second commandment, which is like it. Love our neighbor as ourselves. If we do this, if we love our neighbor as ourselves, as Christ commands that we do, then our religion becomes not an escape, our religion becomes holy. If we don't do this, if we only love God and forget about the other half, we're only living half the gospel. Love of others is the fruit of our love for God. Love of others is the result that comes from our love from God. There is an awful sterility about the lives of those who claim to love God, but in reality, they dispense themselves of obligations to love other people. All of this person, but not that person. All of this group, but not that group. We are to love one another, all people. As in the gospel of last week, all those who have the face of God, all human beings. And there are those who go to the opposite extreme. They exhaust themselves and excuse themselves because they are working for a better, a more equitable society. Think here of socialists and communists and humanists. But they never think of God to pray to him. They, too, only live half the gospel. It's the half that many believers throw away. Christ showed us how to live the total gospel. That is, how to love God and love neighbors. He showed us. He's the model. It's not wrong for us to think and to say, what would Christ do? How would Christ answer? How would Christ behave toward this group, these people? Like socialists or communists, we also want to work for a better world. But we should do so for a deeper reason. The world is not yours. The world is not mine. It is not our world. It is God's world. We're not just human beings, animate objects. We are made in the image and the likeness of God. We are all God's children. Yes, even those who do disclaim God or worship another, even those we have to love, because they too are God's children. Listen to this quote. I cannot believe in the salvation of those who do not work for the salvation of their brothers or sisters. That was St. John Chrysostom in the Middle Ages was saying that, telling us that he can't believe in the faith of anyone who, and their salvation, if they are not also working for the salvation of their brothers or sisters. Those are good words, not only for us to listen to, but also for us to remember. May the Lord grant you peace in ways that the world cannot.